Locomotion means the interaction of bones and muscles. In humans, we have what is called an endoskeleton. That is, our muscles are on top of our bones. This allows us to have a lot of flexibility, a lot of interesting movements. Also means that we bruise ourselves so easily because we're covered with muscles. The whole point of locomotion is to have muscles move bones, which means that the bones aren't fused together. They're connected in a way that they're very flexible and movable. We call these joints. There's many types of joints. The type I'm going to talk about today are called synovial joints. And those are where you have two bones that articulate, not connected, but come together, and they're held together in a bag of fluid. So let's go ahead and draw the basic outline here of what a synovial joint is. So in a synovial joint, you have two bones that come together here. These bones are softened at the ends here with cartilage, usually hyaline cartilage. So here's one bone, here's another bone, and then they have soft ends here. So when they knock together, they don't hurt that much. But you can see that these bones are not fused together. In fact, they're held together by a large amount of connective tissue called a bursa. This is all connective tissue. And inside that connective tissue, it's filled with a fluid, which is synovial fluid. So the bones rotate and they move around, surrounded by the fluid, but they don't fall apart. And you guys probably know that whenever you snap your knuckles or whatever, or crack them, and you hear that noise, what you're actually hearing is air bubbles that are trapped inside synovial fluid, and you're popping them. And you have to wait about 30 seconds for the air to come back in there before you can crack your knuckles again. Many people get infections of these joints here. Bursitis would be one example. And you can have leakage of fluid come out of here, which would mean the bones would really start knocking against each other and hurt quite a bit. So this is a movable situation, a synovial joint. There's two types of joints that IB wants to know about, and they're called the ball and socket and the hinge joint. Let's talk about the hinge joint first. So the example I want to give you today of a hinge joint is the elbow. So what we're going to do is we're going to not draw these pictures down here, but just kind of outline what the parts are. So first of all, who are the bones? So you have three bones that come together for the elbow. They are the humerus, that is the bone in the upper arm. And then you have two bones in the lower arm there, or what we call the forearm, and they're the ulna and the radius. And the three bones come together here with what's going to be a synovial joint. Now this type of synovial joint is called a hinge joint. Now what does that mean? Well, it means it acts just like a hinge. So if the bones are like this, right, then the bones could come closer together like this, or they could come farther apart like that. And so there would be a hinge, right, which would be moving them back and forth. There's another place in the body where we have a hinge joint, and that's at the knee. But let's just briefly take a look at a video of the hinge joint.
The hinge joint. The hinge is a very simple joint. It allows movement only on one axis. Its structure prevents rotation this way or this way. The head of the bone wraps around the cylindrical head of the other, allowing a very stable rotation this way. Going back to the terminology from last week, the hinge joint allows flexion and extension. That's it. That's all it does, but it does it well. Like the hinges on a door, allow it only to open or close.
Okay, so we saw that the two types of movement there are flexion, and flexion is this one here where you bring the two bones closer together. That's flexion. And this one here, where you bring them farther apart, that would be extension. So let's go ahead and write those down. Flexion is where you bring bones closer together. So if this is the hinge joint, we would bring them closer together like this. And extension is where you would bring them farther apart. Okay? Who are the muscles now involved in this? Well, you have muscles on the top of your arm and muscles on the bottom of your arm. There's a lot of muscles here. We're not going to worry about all of them. But if you're looking at the top part, the muscle we should be concerned about is the biceps. And that is the flexor. That's what brings the bones closer together. And then the triceps is on the posterior, the back side of your arm. And that's the one that does extension. So this is the flexor, right? And this is the extender. And the thing to know, though, is that these muscles have to cross over the joint, right? So they cross over it so that when they contract, they can then move the joint. If they didn't go over the joint, the muscles wouldn't do anything. Okay, the second example we want to look about is the hip joint. The hip joint is what we call a ball and socket joint. First of all, who are the bones? Well, the articulation of the two bones is right here. And so you have this really big bone, that's the femur, largest bone in the body. And it articulates with the pelvic bone, or the pelvis, which is actually made of three bones, but we'll just refer to it as the pelvis. Now, this is called a ball and socket, right? And the reason is that it kind of has a ball on the top, which fits into a socket here on the pelvis. Let's talk about the type of movements here by looking at a quick video of that one.
The ball and socket is the champion of all joints. Hooray for the ball and socket. Its structure is just like how it sounds. A ball inside of a socket. This simple and effective structure allows it to move in all axes. Flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, rotation, and circumduction. The two ball and socket joints of the body are at the hip and the shoulder.
So as he said, we have two of them. One is at the hip, that's the one you need to know about, but also at the shoulder. You can rotate the arms in the same way. As far as the movements go here, I really only want you to know three movements. One of them is adduction here. Adduction means to bring the bones farther away from the midline of the body. So if, for example, here's the body, right? So we would have a midline which kind of goes right here down the body. Okay, so what does adduction mean? Adduction means you would bring the leg farther away from the midline. So in other words, if we move it this way, we're sorry, I got this backwards here. Let's see, got it backwards there. Bring bones farther away. Bring bones, let me just make sure I'm okay there. Abduction means bring closer, right. So adduction, I've got this backwards, don't I, here. Sorry about this. Just caught myself, didn't I? So this one here, adduction, add means to bring closer together. So bring bones closer to midline. Okay, that's good. Let's get rid of this. Good. And let's just correct ourselves there. And this one here, ab, as in abdicate, bring bones farther away. Good. Sorry about that. Made a quick mistake, but we're going to catch that. Bring bones farther away. Great. So let's take a look at this again if I got this right. Let's erase this. So adduction, add means to bring closer together. That's good. So that would be you bring the leg closer to the midline. That's adduction. And abduction here, as an abdicate, means you'd bring the leg farther away from the midline. Great. And rotation, that's easy. Rotation means, of course, just to spin around, like so, to rotate. Okay. So adduction means to bring closer. Abduction means to bring farther away. Great. Got it set. Hey, last thing we need to know is what are the muscles? There are a ton of muscles involved here. We're not going to learn all these muscles, but let's just learn the groups of muscles. So on the front of the leg, that would be the quadriceps, right? And on the back of the leg, that would be the hamstrings. In terms of our muscles here, right? So the quadriceps then, these would be the guys who would, let's make sure I got it right, move the leg farther from the midline. So that would be abductors, right? Abductors. And the hamstrings would bring it closer together. Those would be the adductors. I think I got it right this time. And as far as rotation, you'd have to have both of them working together. So both of them working together would cause rotation. Okay, that's the two groups of muscles we need to know, and those are the two types of joints that we need to know.